Welcome to our series on private and entrepreneurial businesses in Africa. Most organizations worldwide are small in size, but their contribution to the global economy and societies both in developed and developing countries is indisputable. According to the World Trade Organization, small and medium enterprises represent over 90% of the business landscape, 60 to 70% of employment, and over 55% of the GDP in developed countries. So it's safe to say that small and medium enterprises are not only significant contributors to the global economy, but they are the economy. My name is Saaleha Akoojee, and I'm a partner in PwC Private Assurance Practice. And today I am joined by Duncan Adriaans, who is the PwC Private Africa Business Leader. PwC Private Practice encapsulates many aspects as it relates to private businesses, family businesses, and high net worth individuals. This ranges from assurance services to consulting services, tax services, as well as advisory services. Today we will be covering the first episode in a three-part series that deals with private and entrepreneurial businesses in Africa. And today we'll be chatting about the general private business landscape. Duncan, welcome to the show and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So Duncan, I want to start off by asking, as the PwC Private Africa Business Leader, where do you see the role of private businesses globally, but specifically also with regards to the revitalization of the global economy and then the South African economy as well?
No, thank you. Thank you, Saaleha, and thank you for the invitation to your three-part series, and I'm absolutely delighted to be part of your program today. If I think about the importance of private businesses within the global Africa and more so South Africa context, the private businesses is an important cog in the wheel for any economy globally to function. And what we see within the African context and more so in the South African context is that private businesses play a very pivotal role insofar as it relates to employment, in terms of the workforce that it recruits, and also in terms of its own contributions to the economy. So, undisputedly, private businesses play a huge role for the effective functioning of any economy all around the globe, and it plays a huge role in South Africa. If I think about our private index, which I understand you'll touch on a little bit later, which we recently released, South Africa has come out 23rd in terms of its ranking of 33 countries within Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And that sets really the fundamentals that need to be in place for any private business to operate effectively in any particular country. But it has an important play and space in any economy.
Undoubtedly, Duncan, in that sense. And you made reference to the index. So that is the index, the PwC's latest EMEA Attractive Index that was released. And what is the outlook there for South African companies as compared to their global counterparts from the survey?
Yeah. So if one looks at the attractiveness index, we start off by saying it's called an attractiveness index. So it's always going to be relative. It's relative to other countries, and there were 33 jurisdictions which part of this particular index. So we improved substantially in this particular index. We were 25th and 31st. Over the previous 2 years, we're now ranking 23rd. And a lot of that has got to do a function of two things. One, some things we're getting right in South Africa, either whether it be about policy reform or regulatory reform that's taken place to help and enable private businesses to be able to flourish, including some of the incentives. At the same time, other countries may have also regressed, which means relative to them, we would have improved as well. But if I do look at the outlook, if that's to answer your other second part of your question, I think it is a positive outlook for private businesses. We have seen some real challenges in our country. And what we have seen is our private businesses have said to themselves, let's just get on with things. There are some specific problems that we have. Let's find solutions within the private sector, within private businesses, and find a way to ensure that it continues to employ people and able to make sure that it remains competitive in the market space as well.
But I think it's great to see, Duncan, that even with the challenges that we've experienced globally and in South Africa, that in South African entities still move 2 places up. You said 25 to 23rd, so I think that's great. And speaking about challenges, so what are some of the challenges that South African businesses are facing from a social and an economic point of view?
Yeah, so we have unique challenges in South Africa. I think many countries all around the globe have many challenges. But if I think about just some challenges from a South African context is around the economy. It's really struggling at the moment. Last week we saw the IMF slash the growth forecast from 1.8% to 1% for South Africa. And a lot of it hinges on the lack of infrastructure support in making sure that some of our exports can get out. I think the levels of crime and corruption are still a real challenge within the South African context, and for private businesses not to be caught up in some of those. And I think there's some technological developments such as AI, and particularly generative AI, that's going to really disrupt and be a change maker in the way we think about it. The fourth one is around climate. It's really important. I flew up here last night, raining in Johannesburg, and the sun's out this morning. I think you're beginning to have a bit of Cape Town weather here at the moment. But I think climate is something that there is more focus needs to be placed on in terms of how it impacts private businesses as well. And then obviously the traditional access to finance, I think it remains a perennial problem for many private businesses, and how we access some of that finance remains absolutely key, and how we tap into it as well.
Yeah, certainly a lot of disruptors in the business world, and not specific to South Africa, but I think, all companies actually experience that. And
fair enough, yeah.
Especially when you speak about generative AI, that's, buzzword everywhere. I suppose one of the other buzzwords we hear in is ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. We read about it everywhere. Is it relevant to private companies, and if so, why?
My simple answer would be ignore it at your peril. And I say that because if you look at consumers today, consumers have more choice than what they've had before. Consumers are able to voice their dissatisfaction or satisfaction using social media to influence. And if one looks at how consumer choices are changing around looking at products that are more environmentally friendly, or safe labor practices, those are on the increase. I think many years ago we spoke about the triple P, people, profit, and planet. And the way we think more about our nature, sustainability is becoming an increasingly important. So private businesses, in my view, cannot ignore the impact of ESG, climate. These matters are all interconnected, interdependent. So if you want to remain resilient, competitive in the market, and attracting yourself to customers, I think those platforms are going to be important. The other aspect also to think about, particularly in ESG and climate, is thinking about how resilient is your supply chain. So if your supply chains are going to be disrupted as a result of climate or adverse climate, it's something that you need to think about from a business continuity perspective. You need to think about how much disruption will that create to your workforce and so forth. So it is becoming a very popular area in terms of how private businesses need to think of adaptation strategies in making it work. Now, many of these things one would say, well, that's the public sector, that's government's problem, they need to sort it out. But as we have seen, the way we make these work together in private partnerships, together with the private public sector, is definitely going to make a difference in alleviating some of these challenges going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's so important not only for corporates, but also for private companies as well.
Correct.
From an environmental, social, and governance perspective. So Duncan, what would your key message be for private companies as they navigate through all these challenges and all these disruptors while they still try to grow their business, still try to get access to funding?
Yeah, so one of the key things, and I think it's so beautiful when you say SMMEs, it's small to medium-sized enterprises, and there's also large private enterprises. So depending on where you find yourself in the continuum, whether it be a startup and scale-up, I think access to finance is probably giving you sleepless nights. Depending whether you're a large private business, you're thinking about how do I leverage my balance sheet to my advantage. And the key to all of this is about making sure that you use your balance sheet to your advantage. I think it's going to be critically important. We're all expecting potentially some drop in interest rates this year, and we hope for many that's going to be relief for many consumers. But that relief gives also private businesses the opportunity to perhaps think about, how do I refinance, renegotiate if the cost of debt is going to decrease during the course of the year. And I think if we use that to the advantage, I think that's going to be very important. The second aspect is around, in terms of advice, would be around re-looking at your working capital practices. So what we have seen is you could perhaps renegotiate your supplier payment terms with your suppliers in terms of making sure you keep cash in your bank a little bit longer. But at the same time, re-looking and revisiting and potentially incentivizing your customers in terms of increasing the cash inflow that comes in and making that work. So I think that's going to be important. And then last but not least is to do some stress testing exercises. Look at your cash flows, do some forecasting, stress test those and say, well, where are the pain points in my business? At that particular point, what are the decisions I need to be making now to avoid some of those pain points later into the future as well? So I think there are a number of things, particularly using the balance sheet to your advantage and making sure that you optimize the market to your advantage going forward as well.
Okay. Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, some really practical advices there, and I think something that businesses can really practically implement. So thank you for that. That's all we have time for today. But thank you, Duncan. Really appreciate the knowledge and the insights. Really appreciate you coming through and sharing. It's clear that growing a business can be intensely challenging. It's very demanding, and it's very personal as well. And it's also clear that private businesses, small, medium enterprises have unique challenges when compared to their corporate counterparts. And we can see that from chatting to Duncan as well. PwC's private practice work with family businesses, private companies, and high net worth individuals as they navigate through the opportunities and the challenges through the different stages of their growth cycles. Thank you for joining us today, and please remember to join us for the next episode in this 3-part series which covers private businesses in Africa. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.